Welcome. This is the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinscoe, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, Forbes contributor, and general explorer of the service and experience space. On the podcast, I seek out and interview entrepreneurs, leading business people, authors, tech leaders, academics, and generally cool people doing interesting stuff in the service and experience space. Check out the archive at adrianswinscoe.com. That's enough for me. Let's get into the interview. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Martin Teasdale from Get Out of Rap, and also Ed Creasy, an old friend of the podcast, I believe, who is the VP of Global Solutions Engineering at Calabrio. Hello, gentlemen. How are you doing?
Awesome.
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having us.
You are most welcome. I am also excited because of some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. But for the benefit of our listeners, can I ask you to just introduce yourself briefly? I mean, let's start with you, Martin, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. I think like you guys and many of your listeners, I started in the industry on the phones and have stayed in the contact center world and CX world ever since. Over the last few years, my wife calls it a midlife crisis, but I call it a risk. But I decided to go out on my own with Get Out of Rap, which is contact center content and, like yourself, podcasting and things like that. And I also run a online team leader community.
Ed, follow that, sir.
It's impossible. He's like an industry hero, and I work for a software company. So yeah, I'm like the Darth Vader of podcast. But actually quite a similar background. I started on the phones back in the early 90s, and one of the things in this data is great is talking about careers and formulating careers. And I just had those. I went to complaints because I was good at solving problems, and I still think that's the most meaningful 18 months of my career.
Awesome.
Was, just being frankly abused by customers, but they with good reason. Did a bit of contact center management, did a bit of marketing, which was fun because I was product marketer causing all the problems for the contact center that I complain about now. I had 7 years doing mystery shopping and measuring empathy, which is another big moment, just really interesting from the outside in, holding a mirror up to organizations, until that got killed by AI. So I couldn't beat them, so I joined them, and I'd worked with 3 different software companies for the last near on 20 years, and now run a big, diverse global team, which is a load of fun. But mainly, I love talking about CX as well. So
awesome. Now, I know that you folks have been collaborating on a piece of research which has been recently released, and it's called Voice of the Agent. And I'm really excited to learn a bit more about it, and also to kind of like to share it with people that listen to the podcast, because it's not often that you get that sort of agent perspective. So can you give me a little bit of a background, kind of like how it came about, and what are some of the main findings, the main headlines out of it? I mean, I don't know who wants to go first. I mean, who came to who first? Martin, did you go to Ed? Ed, did you go to Martin? How did that come about?
Well, I think, Ed, this is a continuation of some work that you guys have been doing for the last few years, and then we came together to do this work in 2024. So it's probably, I think it's a nice story to hear what you guys have done in the years preceding, and how this kind of takes it into, like you said, Adrian, the agent perspective. It is fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but there is a lovely sort of pivot as well about why research, I think, is different. So Fabrio's done a state of the contact center report for years, and it was always either managers or consumers. And it told the story of the last 4 years. It was like the Great Resignation, the big cloud move. We did one about brand, which was had some interesting data a couple of years ago. So it was a narrative of the last few years. So that's been great. What I love about this is we didn't really ask about agents. Ask agents very often. I think we get it once, generally managers or consumers. I think the one thing is the fact we're talking to agents is really important. And the second thing, I think the idea was a combination from a young marketing manager of ours, and that sounds patronizing, but I don't mean that. I mean about young people getting to the front of a vendor, coming up with a brilliant idea, and Rachel smashed it, frankly. And then someone like Martin who's taken a risk to have a voice for the team leader and the agent and the call center community coming together. And I think that's wonderful. That combination of of someone new to our company doing a brilliant piece of work with a brilliant innovator like Martin.
Yeah, I mean, can I just say, I'm going to big shout out to Rachel Russell, who is a superstar.
Totally.
Yeah, totally agree. It was great fun building this with her. This is when you work with someone that is just so in flow and on it, it's a real privilege. And very, very proud to see the results. And I think now this is why this podcast is great. Your podcast is great. The more we can talk about what we found, the greater impact we can have on making things better, and working on the good things and looking at why some things are not so good, but really taking action. So yeah, I think it's a great piece of work.
And what are some of the big kind of headlines that stood out for you, or some of the things that you go, these are the show stealers? Because I mean, there's some things that showed up for me, and I wanted to kind of dig into them. But I just wanted to get your perspective, like before I going to go, tell me about that. Tell me about that. What are the headlines for yourselves?
I'll go first on this one because I love the AI headline. Having just come back from CCC Expo as well, everyone's talking about it. Every vendor's talking about it, but most companies are as well. And the fact that the headline said agents weren't finding it very useful is really important. But I think the extension from that is what agents were talking about was about their careers. And I love that sort of juxtaposition, which is like, hang on a sec, stop thinking about AI so much, and maybe let's have a look at the frontline people who make the difference to the customer.
Awesome. Martin, anything else that stood out for you, or the biggest headline for you?
Ed's spot on, one I would add is the element of pride. We put that question in quite early in the survey, and when we've talked about the results afterwards, me and Ed, as we mentioned in the intro, we're both previous agents. And I can remember as an agent, I was working for a bank in finance. And if people outside the industry asked me what I did, I said I worked for the bank. I didn't add on that I was a call center agent. Right. And there's an element that's pride driven.
Yeah.
So to hear that over 60% of the respondents of the survey said they were proud to work in this industry, that was such a pleasant surprise. I thought that was amazing.
I mean, that's really interesting, because it actually leads me on to the thing that I wanted to pick up on, that was in the report. And it's like one of the first sections where you talk about this enhanced reputation of the contact center industry. And that you said there's a lot of people that feel pride, or feel proud of the work that they do, or they're trying to do. And that's a bit of a shift. And it's sort of, I mean, but do you have any idea about what's driving sort of that shift? Because actually the contact center industry, for the longest time, I think for all time, I've always done important work, right? Because they're helping customers deal with kind of problems that they have. But it's often not necessarily been the best regarded function in large organizations. But and that's sort of almost like dripped down to the people. I feel like it's trickled down to the people. But actually, you're saying there's this pride of the work that people are trying to do. I mean, do you have any insight in terms of what's driving that sort of puffing out of chests, as it were?
I'll go try. Sorry.
Go on, Ed.
You're going to have to nominate, because we were so keen to talk about this. I think one of the questions was interesting about what motivated agents to join the industry. And that tells us something. The top one by a good way was steady income.
Right.
So I think there's some macro trends around, soft economy and what's happened with the psychodrama of the last 8 years. And people wanting a more, the job has suddenly become very attractive. Whereas, for me, I was a temp. It was a temp start. So I think that's an issue. And the gig economy is almost like, connected to that. Because you've got a lot of these, 0-hour contracts roll out there for younger people. And I think this is a more secure, more diverse role.
Right. Martin, anything to add on that?
I think it's fascinating. It's great, isn't it? Because as soon as that result came in, and you're like, oh wow, this is brilliant. You think, right, if we're going to do this again, we need to ask why. You know, why do you feel that pride? Because you can only really Ed's zeroed in on the data, and that is the factual things you can say. If you were to surmise, I think, you know, we've been in this industry a long time, and there's one thing you can say is that across an agent's environment and ecosystem, everything's got better in terms of if they're working in a contact center, we care more about the environment now. Everything's better in terms of break rooms and just the look and feel of where they're working.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about their leadership, you know, emotional intelligence wasn't a thing when we started, nor was consideration of neurodiversity and mental health. So you would like to think that the talent within our industry has evolved, which lends itself to better management. I do think it's going to be interesting when we look at the career paths, because I think that plays a part where we can do more, and technology as well. You know, if you're working somewhere where the technology matches what you have in your pocket when you leave work, that can be associated with, yeah, I like working here, I'm proud of it. You work somewhere where it's like something that's, you've gone back in a time machine, you're less likely to be proud of that.
Yeah.
Company. So I think we've got better across the board, but it would be, and we're already thinking about what will we do next? What can we do with this data? Because it would be nice to find out, why do you feel this way? What are the things that contribute towards that? But for me, it's a great starting point. You know, that this was 520 agents. This is not a small survey. So if this is reflective of our industry, we have to take that pride that they feel and make sure that we treat it as a very, very precious commodity that we've got to kind of help elevate.
Sure.
These are our future stars. These are our future people that can improve customer experience. You know, so we've got to take the right steps now.
I think there's, like, it's good that you highlighted a number of factors. I mean, I think Ed's point about macro conditions, and there's a word that sort of circulates in that sort of macro conversation, and it talks about the precariat. You know, the people that are working there, and it feels quite precarious economically for them. You talk about 0 hours contracts, gig economy and things, but actually have something which goes, I'm going to get X hours, I'm going to get steady income, opportunities for, you know, bonuses and rewards and career progression, all these other things. That's going to feel like a good thing. But then, as you say, Martin, that conditions have improved kind of over kind of like time, and it's you almost feels like things are then starting to match up. And I kind of understand where that's coming from, but also in the broader sort of, I feel like, environment, people are starting to talk about this is important, right? Service and experience is important stuff. And so it all kind of points to, oh yeah, that makes sense when you actually step back and look at it. But the thing that struck me about the next thing that struck me in the report, which I thought was interesting, was that 79%, I think it was 79% of agents said that they received a wage increase in the last 12 months. And I thought, well, okay, that's great, given that we've gone through this cost of living crisis and people are getting some of their wages are getting upgraded to take that into account. But the report did also muse that whether this was just a box ticking exercise and something they were forced into doing because of the macro environment. And it always brought me back to that, the pride bit and the importance of it, but also made me think rather, should we be reevaluating the role and rewarding it more in line with the rising complexity of the contact center role, particularly if you think about macro figures, where the report said that the average wage was reported at somewhere between 20 and 25k a year. That's sterling a year. But UK economy data says that the median average wage in the UK is somewhere between 30 and 34 thousand pounds a year. And I just wonder if there's this disconnect between the changing complexity and requirements of the role and actually how it's being rewarded. And I wanted to get your thoughts on it. Martin, I'll come back to you kind of on that first, if you don't mind.
It's you make a lot of good points there, and that kind of is it something that's just had to be done? It's very hard, I think, to forget your own personal experiences, and having been at both ends, where as an agent and then latterly part of a senior leadership team, where we were looking at what could we do for our agents? Can we afford to give a pay rise? And if so, what is it? Being in the room when those decisions were made, and understanding the impact that has. You mentioned earlier this kind of the nature of a precarious. You're in a precarious position, and you come to a contact center because of steady income. We're asking agents to deal with more complex queries, but to become problem solvers. Yes, it's good that everyone's getting a pay rise, but to your point, is it enough? I'd like to think that this report, as it's done with us now, and has made you think and postulate and ask that question, that question will be asked across senior leadership teams within the industry, because there does seem to be a disconnect in where we're traveling in terms of the requirements of the role, and that we're giving it a bit more kudos, that we're saying to people there'll be less transactional stuff for you to pick up, because we really want you to get into the nitty gritty of delivering excellent customer service and that customer experience. And some of that will be problem solving. Is the salary that we give people keeping a pace with that?
Mm-hmm.
Probably not.
Right.
How you resolve that is another question.
Yeah. Well, it's another question, but it's a question that's worth posing. Does the salary and the reward structure match rather the growing requirements and complexity of the role in like a market-driven economy? Look at it and go, does it make sense? Is it, are we valuing it in the right kind of like way? And if not, then how do we challenge the economics of it all to be able to kind of to readdress that? That's something for us. I mean, it's a perennial thing, and something that we'll just need to kind of chew on. But I mean, Ed, anything for you to add on that?
As you were talking, I was thinking, I'm an outsider, so I'm glad you went to Martin first. It depends how AI delivers, right? Because we know what the predictions are, that suddenly AI is going to reduce the number of agents. And, I don't think that's happened yet, but if suddenly we see that, you could get, it could be much easier for companies to justify paying agents more. But the problem is there's going to be fewer agents.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're seeing what's happening in the car industry in the UK this week. The worry would be is that there'll just be fewer jobs out there.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other side of it, because we spend a lot of time trying to justify the investment in software, is, could that old story of, going from a cost center to a value center, could the customer experience channel generate more income for companies? And could they make that connection? So actually you could justify paying agents more because actually they are generating more customer loyalty, or they're generating more sales, or one of the things I see all the time doing working with speech and text analytics is the amount of needless cost there is in the contact center that could be avoidable. Not we know you see in the contact center. Let me be clear. That's often caused by other areas, but it manifests itself in the customer experience. So that's my thoughts on those two things. Would be, can the contact center produce more so they can pay more, or will it just be because we've got fewer agents out there?
And I think it's a great point. And a lot of it's about how you view the contact center, whether it's a cost center or a value/revenue center or whatever. Yeah. It's fascinating. There was an interesting piece of Accenture research. I think it's from 2-3 years ago. Looked at the sort of. They said they said that they reckoned that about 80% of all contact centers were generally run as cost centers, and then about 20% possibly had a slightly broader kind of remit. And they reckon the difference in investment going from a cost center to a revenue center was like 0.5% extra investment from a revenue perspective, I think it was. So you take that small amount of extra investment, channel it into the contact center, but the uplift in profitability, extra revenue, everything was like 3x, 4x sort of like times. So the payback was just like, I mean, it was like super quick. But it shows you there's kind of that there's the fine balance, so the fine margins around tipping the scale. But a lot of the time, in terms of being able to sort of to think about it that way, it's just more of a mindset sort of perspective. But Ed, I wanted to circle back on the thing that you said earlier, because it was a thing that stood out for me in the reports, was this idea that, was it 56% of agents said they didn't find AI useful in their daily roles. And I mean, that's a combination of, I think, 47 and 9 or something. There was like useful, not very useful. And so in aggregate, it was like 56%.
Yeah.
And I was a bit like, go on then, Ed, you're the software provider. Have at it. What's going on there?
We're not putting it in front of agents in a sensible way before we put it live. I think it's number one thing.
Okay.
I was sat with an agent last week with taking payments with 15 applications on their desktop. I mean, it was a complex environment for other reasons, but actually, if you think of what they were doing. So yeah, I think that's the number one thing that happens. And I sell this stuff, and I see where the decisions can be made, because the vendor's always looking for get as senior as they can in the organization, get as close as they can to the budget. And I think that's the number one problem. The industry's made promises over promises for forever, right? I remember back in the day, the early 2007, I studied on speech analytics. One of the biggest challenges we had, I worked for a cool company called Nexidia back then that was trying to disrupt a bit. And the biggest challenge we had was we were trying to tell the truth. Right. We were trying to say, this is how this is really going to work, and that stuff isn't going to work. And I think vendors have a habit of pushing their own hype. So yeah, I think number one is it's great to have an example and an idea people can go and do, right? People have heard of champion challenges, or they've heard of test and control. Is if you are rolling out pretty much anything, but it's great with tech, is to give it to one team and see how they do with it. And it's got to be a typical team, not a superstar team, because then you just get bias, or the opposite, because you just get a disaster. And then compare that to a control group. Make sure that those promises that you've heard are gonna be delivered. And that sort of discipline, you learn so much by doing that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
Martin, anything to add? Anything from the agent sort of side?
I think what this demonstrates, look what Ed and the team at Calabria are doing. This research is fascinating, and we're talking about it now. But ultimately, it's about finding out what the people that are dealing with our customers today, tomorrow, next year are their world. What this particular point tells us is that they haven't been involved in why this technology has been deployed. Often it's done to them. And as an agent, you're thinking, to Ed's point, it takes me 7 minutes to log in the morning because I'm opening up all these different applications. And now I've got something else giving me prompts that I don't need.
Yeah.
That is an interruption. It should start with AI technology is so good now. What would you like taken away from your day that will enable you to deliver a great customer service, a great customer experience for the customers that you're engaging with? And agents, we've seen this with this research, are not backward in coming forward. They will tell you. They'll say, it'd be great if you could take this away. If you had a magic wand, so you don't have any of these, I know this isn't possible, so I'm not going to say it. With a magic wand, what would you just take away, improve? How can we make your job better? And start from there.
I think you made a really interesting, point, and it reminded me about how oftentimes things are done to people. And I think if you think about all of the research that came out of McKinsey that said all these, any major project which is a change or transformation or whatever project, I mean, it was that 70% of those projects fail. If you dig into that research, one of the biggest kind of reasons that they come up with for why they fail is because it's around communication and that they just haven't talked to people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, and related to that, I remember speaking to a partner from PwC about some enterprise technology adoption stat research that they did, and that was on the podcast a few years ago. And they said that something like the largest majority, probably about 75% of most leaders in most organizations, don't consult their people before they they make technological decisions, and they wonder why stuff isn't adopted, because it's just like cascading down this and this and this, and you're like, wow. And so it's the interesting thing is that and I think this is a trick that people forget, and I always say to people, people talk about AI, and I have this. I wrote this piece the other a little while ago, and I said, look, the problem with the AI is that there's two types of AI, and we're missing one of them. And so there's artificial intelligence, and then there's agent intelligence, and we're not leveraging the agent intelligence, because what we're not acknowledging is that we have a network of biological supercomputers that sit inside our contact centers that we're not accessing. But when you access it and you put these two things together, then wonderful things can happen.
Yeah.
But I think it's all about, it's almost perennial problems. It's like technology adoption and change management and all those kind of good things. And sometimes it just takes longer to go further.
Yeah, I love agent intelligence. You're right. This has been, it's time immemorial, right? This is a problem that we've had for a long time. I can remember as an agent, we were told, great news, we've got this new technology that allows your team leaders to intervene directly into your ear whilst you're talking to the customer. But don't worry, the customer can't hear you. And it was the most discombobulating thing ever. I'm talking to a customer and your team leader says, don't forget to cross-sell them buildings insurance. And you can't help it. You answer. And I went, I won't. And then the customer's saying, sorry, what? Oh, don't worry, I'm not talking to you. Where were we? And it was complete. No one liked it. It didn't help. Our team leaders at the time loved it for a while. This was great because it was control, but it didn't work. And again, it was one of those things that very quickly we stopped using it.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating. You actually see people on the TV when they have these kind of in-ear sort of things, and they have to go through specific training and practice not to look distracted when the producer is banging on at something in their ear, like going, try not to go, what? Because you're still kind of like having to read off the video prompter or whatever it is about somebody's talking to you in your ear, and it's just like, it's a skill.
Yeah,
people just that stuff doesn't just happen just like that.
Yeah. I'd love to bring like some 19th century people. We were talking the other day, Adrian, about that quote about from Henry Huxley, into seeing the way we're talking today. Like how after a million years of hominid evolution, suddenly some incredible models. Don't get me wrong, I daily get my mind blown by how good generative AI is, but we're just deciding that human evolution is going to be changing overnight. And I'm just thinking, and that's one thing I loved from this research is it looked at some of the things that were the gaps were actually very pragmatic things. If you know Brad Cleveland's book, the contact center management sort of Bible, or one of them, you read it and it's quite pragmatic. It's like, got to get these things right to create a healthy organization and a contact center. And the work Martin's doing is doing a lot of that. Yeah. And it's a nice reminder that to say, Gen AI is going to have a great role.
Yeah.
But we still got to get, people's work-life balance right. That's
Yeah.
what they really value. And the quality of feedback is literally like a to-do list for every contact center manager, isn't it, Martin? It's like, read and then make sure you're doing that. Because if you're not doing that, you're probably not going to make your people very happy.
If you're a contact center leader, get this research and A, ask your own team these questions, but B, work through that list that Ed has just talked about. And you are going to make your team very, very happy, and the performance is going to go up. And Ed is dead right. It's very, very pragmatic.
Mm-hmm. I think the thing, one of the pragmatic sort of things is that, and one of the things we also forget, I think, in large organizations, particularly if you're working in this fast-paced sort of environment, sort of challenging environment, is that organizations, they are also organisms, right? They are social organisms, and there was a piece of data in the research that says 38% of agents say they never have planned social activities. And I was a bit like, oh, that feels like a missing piece. I know it's going to be hard, and it requires probably longer term sort of like planning and thinking. But it's like, I mean, what's the implication of that? What should be the message to the team leaders and the contact center to sort of directors around that particular statistic? Martin, I mean, what do you think? I mean, is it just like going, do more? Don't forget that side of the equation?
I think 100%. You have to recognize, certainly given the hybrid world that we live in now, that more effort is required. But that extra effort in ensuring that there are these connections and communities that exist within contact centers, it's why I'm still in the industry. It is the relationships that you build. And those relationships are not just restricted to within work. You know, I've been lucky enough to work in some, I would say they were like thriving small towns. When you think about the different social groups that grew out of, it was much like being at university when you go to Freshers Week. If you were interested in bird watching, wrestling, cocktails, you could find it at Freshers Week. I thought that kind of move from a university graduate and the lifestyle there into contact centers, there were so many similarities that if you wanted to play rugby or tennis, whatever and name any sport, there were people that had organized a little group within the contact center. So a lot of it didn't even need facilitation by leadership. But then when leadership did say, what would you guys like to do? We want to do a summer fair, or we want to do X, Y, and Z. There was great enthusiasm for doing that. And then you capture those moments. These are the memories that people have that then lead to retention, loyalty, people bouncing to come into work because they're wondering what the next planned event is. They're talking about the previous one. All of this is, this is kind of tribal, and how that statistic, 38% say they've never had any planned social activities, was alarming. I thought, we can always be too busy and focused on our KPIs to think that's all that matters. This, don't do it at your own risk.
Sure.
Yeah. And we're probably all feeling the buzz from seeing each other face to face at the conference, right? So, that was, commercially it was a good event, but actually, personally, it was just brilliant hanging out with you guys. And I caught up with some former colleagues, and, you remind you of the importance, having spent, probably the last 15 years in my shed or on a plane. So I managed quite a large team from like California to Melbourne, and it's literally impossible. So the tips I would give on this would be, make sure you're using tech socially. And I've noticed, because we've been good and bad. There's been some times when we've fallen out of the habit of having, the all hands meetings that are very lighthearted and using whatever tools there are out there, quizzes. And I know it sounds like a cliche, but I've noticed there's one part of my business which stopped doing that, and I've noticed that the connections started to atrophy.
Mm-hmm.
Look at your budgets. So, one of the things we do with our UK team every year is we go on a very, very long walk. So we did the 3 peaks, and it's not, I know contact centers and budgets, maybe you can't do that, but, certainly put it into your budgeting process of saying we need to do this, because I've seen examples of people who don't have any travel budget, don't have any ability to get together. And you can be quite smart with budgets to going for a nice walk is pretty cheap, to be honest. And the third one, I get frustrated with the people who just switch their videos off. I know it's not really the point. If you've got a hybrid or a totally remote agent workforce, I think if you get into that habit of turning video off, you know what's going on. You know people aren't listening, and they're multitasking, and they're not connecting. And I can see the difference in I've got different teams, some who are all on video still 4 or 5 years, into this era of remote work, and I think the connections are stronger.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's all sorts of, there's a variety of things that we can do. I think the thing that I take away from this finding is how many people aren't really doing anything and are potentially missing a trick. Martin, you talk about things being tribal, and I think that what's fascinating is I would be interested to see if there's a correlation between agent attrition and paucity of social activities. Because I would guess, my hypothesis would be places that have fewer sort of social activities may actually suffer from a higher attrition rate, because actually when things get busy and stressful, they don't have those social ties that bind people to it. They'll help each other get through things because they've got more connections that extend beyond their neighbor, or they're kind of like, the teammate. They'll have a broader sort of social kind of net. But I would say it's like, don't ignore it, because we're social beings.
Yeah,
this stuff matters.
And the thing is, it's interesting you said the 3 peaks, because straight away that took me back to, we did the 3 peaks with the company I was at a good few years ago, and I saw someone at Expo who I hadn't seen since that, and that's what we spoke about. We didn't talk about, oh, do you remember the time that we were our dashboard was all green? No, we didn't speak about that. We spoke about that minibus journey to Ben Nevis, and all of those different things. But the one thing I would say is there is an inordinate amount of free resources available that you don't have to do. Social events, social activities is one thing, but for me, there's also this things that can lead to connections where you're sharing things that engage people, that they're games, gamification, that doesn't have to necessarily be tied to performance.
Mm-hmm.
During the pandemic, we were all very good and very creative and played lots of games. Well, the industry behind that, and I would say the majority of it is still free, have moved that on. So even if your entire teams are remote, there's plenty of resources out there where you could have some fun with them. And if you're a leader that isn't necessarily that way inclined, delegate it. Get someone else to say, right, we need to start doing some things with our guys that are just playful, and so yeah, really, really important stat, that one. And again, something else where we can go, let's revisit that and see what people have done as a result.
Yeah. Brilliant. I mean, so obviously I'll make sure that in the highlights and the notes that I could put together when this goes live, that I'll point people to the research so they can go and download it and find it and dig into it, themselves. But before we kind of move on sort of and wrap up, I mean, anything else that you want to highlight from the report that you think that we've missed out? Ed?
The bit I love is I'll paint a scene at our customer conference in May. It was in Manchester earlier this year, and one of our customers got up, classic panel, get up on stage, and they were talking about giving agents the ability to control their own schedules.
Mm-hmm.
And they were, they said, we could never take it away from our agents now. And what I love is quite old-fashioned ideas. I mean, these have been around a long time, this ability, that it just validated that that's still important. And on that, to-do list for contact center leaders, it would be go and chat to your planners and say, okay, because you should have the tech, unless you're sat on Excel.
Mm-hmm.
But can we give people the ability to choose when they work, both proactively and reactively,
mm-hmm.
And still give a great customer experience? And I think that came out because there was a lot of positive data there. There were agents saying they do get their time off approved.
Mm-hmm.
But there was still that 46% of agents saying they have little or no control of their schedules. And I think that's a nice little to-do list, right? Can we get that number right? I think 6% felt they had completely full control. And I think that's a great opportunity.
Martin?
Ed makes a really good point, because we saw in the research that the majority believed that their work-life balance was important from their manager's point of view. How that is manifested a lot of the time is within their schedules.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that not only are they prepared for peak demand, but also from that work-life balance point of view, their time off requests are more likely to be accepted, and they do feel that the scheduling is fair. And those things are really, really important, because that is your daily reminder that your well-being is important.
Yeah, perfect. So thank you for all of that. I'm just conscious of time. I'm going to ask you a few quick fire kind of questions just to wrap up before we finish up. And the first one I want to do is, I always like to kind of boil things down for people, right? Because it's almost a bit like, this is the best advice corner. And to tee people up for that, what I've been doing is asking them to complete this sentence. And the sentence is, if you want to improve your customer or employee experience, Martin says, do this. Martin, complete that sentence. How would you complete that sentence?
It would be very glib to say, read the research and take action on it.
That's number one.
Number two, I would say, talk to your teams. And that isn't just the customer facing ones, it's the support functions as well.
Mm-hmm.
Ensure those communication highways between them are clear. That kind of, most of the things that are not quite right or not quite there within our operations, you can trace it back to some kind of breakdown in communication.
Yeah.
So talk to your teams, it's the customer facing ones, and just ask them, what can we do to make your job better, easier? Because if you do that, the customer experience is going to improve.
Yeah.
Because I think we associate the role with not necessarily having a strategic view. If we take away the problems that agents have, customers will 100% benefit.
Mm-hmm.
So just ask them.
Absolutely. Ed, same question to you, sir.
Okay, so number one, get your agents involved in the scheduling process at the start and at the end. So that will make a difference to your churn, and it will make a difference to your employee engagement and probably your efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, one of the stats we didn't cover was that most coachings, trainings, and one-to-one was done monthly.
Mm.
I think this is a role for AI and analytics and automation. Is you could use that to automate a load of the stuff you're doing manually at the moment, team managers, quality managers, but not with a view to reducing headcount. Take that same headcount and get them to do weekly, even daily coaching. I've seen people use analytics on a daily basis around extreme frustration. Give you an example. Customers are extremely frustrated. They triaged it. It was identified by AI. and then they took an action every day, and that smashed their complaints target. So yeah, those are the two I'd recommend.
Excellent. Thank you. Very, very, very cool. Now, second quick fire question is a punk question, obviously, Punk CX podcast. And so what I'd like to ask you, and Ed, I'll come to you first on this one, is what company or brand do you think takes more of a punk approach to experience and service, and why?
I'm going to say H&M.
Okay.
Because, and it's kind of, I don't know if this is anti-punk, but they spoke with us at the expo, and what they did was they said I'm going to get the basics right for agents. So it's kind of repetition of what I've just said. They use workforce management really, really well. And when you heard their story, you might say it's not rocket science, but if you look at our data, it's actually something that maybe half of contact centers aren't doing effectively. And there's one I can't name, but they're a UK national healthcare contact center, and I think it's punk because they are taking the best of clinical work. They know their stuff really well, but they know they need to get the best of the contact center world. And I love the way they're saying, respect that we're clinical, because we cannot sacrifice our clinical standards, but I'm going to be humble and learn something from somewhere else. I love what they're doing, because
awesome.
It's really exciting.
I love that. Martin, who do you think?
I really like Nespresso. It's not because I'm a coffee addict, albeit I use their products far too much, probably. Knowing some of the people behind the scenes and how much work they've put into this, I always think the true measure of CX is when something goes wrong. And their response to my machine breaking and the interactions I had, all coordinated across all of the channels, and then having to talk to one of their advisors actually was a real pleasure. Really relaxed, and I think that relaxed tone came from, it's born out of competence, right? If you're competent, then the communication part flows. And it was reassuring. It was just really, really well done. So, it's I'm a bit indulgent. It's a personal recollection.
Not at all. Not at all. These are the things that matter, right? They stand out in your memory.
Yeah, I just thought they did it really well. Seamless when you're ordering or when you need anything, but when it went wrong, they really delivered, and they delivered with personality as well. So, yeah, really, really impressed.
Nice. So big shout out to H&M. Big shout out to the nameless healthcare sort of who is very much a clinical expert. We're humble enough to go and learn from the service domain and try and how they can balance those things up, because they know they're just as important. And big shout out to Nespresso, sort of too. So thank you for all of that. Final question. And this is something I've been doing recently because it's just a reflection of the world being a weird place. And I feel like there's too much doom scrolling going on. And I've been asking people to share with me a good news story to end the podcast on. And it can be about anything. So, Ed, tell me a story. Tell me what's the most interesting, positive, or exciting thing that you've seen in the last week. Thing that you've just gone, oh, that's cool, or oh, that's made me feel warm and fuzzy inside.
I was thinking about this question, and it's a bit narcissistic, but it's just what made me feel great this week. And it's partly, the background of this conversation and CC Expo is I thought a lot about when I was an agent. And I told a story. In fact, Martin was at the speak. I told a story which really reminded me of that time. And that's been the quite moving, actually. I've really enjoyed remembering what it was like to be in the front line, working with people who are passionate about it, and started getting all the memories of the silly stories I told you the one about when I was demoted and sat in the corner stamping faxes.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's been loads of fun bringing back all those memories. So yeah, that's my happy story.
Awesome. Thank you, Ed. Martin?
Mine is it's funny because it's about connection. Just over a year ago now, at the time I thought, why am I doing this? But I signed up for work to be the employer of work experience girls from the school that our daughters go to. So one of them was my daughter, and she brought two friends, and it was a week of exposing them to our industry. And we went to a contact center. It was the police control center. Fascinating. I arranged for the girls to come with me to an industry event. And then, as well as helping me out with my day to day, I arranged some sessions with some people within our industry who, I certainly look up to, and they just would spend an hour with the girls. Anyway, I saw one of them for the first time face to face again. She came round to see my daughter, and she's working in the industry now, and
Wow.
she's just gone past her probation. It's a service desk. And I said, "Oh, what do you think?" She said, "I love it. I love my team." I said, "Oh, what's your team leader like?" She said, "Oh, she's brilliant. She really cares for me." And I said, "What will you stay? What do what do you want to do?" And she said, "Oh yeah, I'm already thinking about the next role I can go up to. I've just got to do these, and that was all kind of mapped out, and it was brilliant." And then again, I saw her another week. She said, "Oh, guess what? My dad is going to be at Expo." And he came and found me, and it was we just had this great chat. We're gonna meet up in our local town, and it's about going right back to the start. It's about pride in our industry, and talking about it. And what that then does is, in a small way, Imi went to go into contacts. Probably again, it wasn't something that she dreamt of, but the exposure to our industry through that week made it less daunting, made it something that was, I might consider this, and then just meeting her dad at Expo was a real highlight for me.
Awesome. Well, thank you. What a couple of great stories. I mean, and so I just want to say, first of all, congratulations on the research. I think it's a really useful thing. I would encourage everybody to kind of go out and seek it out. I will make sure I kind of get it all linked up when this kind of goes out kind of live, because I think it's useful. It gives a voice to the agent, the people that are on the front line. It gives us then potentially you can check your experience against it and maybe come up with some work that can be done, maybe identify some easy fixes. So congratulations on that. Thank you for sharing your time and your expertise and your insight with me today. And also, finally, lovely to see you both at the CC Expo that was held in the Excel Centre in London at the end of November. Because this is going to go out in January, so it'll be a little bit of time since then. But it was lovely to see you both there, and thank you for sharing some time with me today. It's been awesome.
Love it.
Thank you very much.
Wow, what a great interview. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Find out more about me and the work that I do at adrianswinscoe.com. Do leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have any comments, feedback, or questions about the podcast, then feel free to send me a message to podcast@adrianswinscoe.com. And do tune in again. Thanks very much.